The leaked audio hit like a thunderbolt at 3:47 a.m. Eastern Time. "We're going in hard, and we're taking their oil. Maduro won't know what hit him." The voice was unmistakable, gravelly, confident, dripping with the kind of casual arrogance that had become America's international calling card. Behind closed doors at Mar-a-Lago, maps of Venezuelan oil fields spread across mahogany tables like battle plans from a bygone empire. Red circles marked extraction sites. Blue lines traced pipeline routes. Yellow highlighter tracked estimated billions in untapped cradnuff. Black gold to make even the greediest oil baron salivate. The room reeked of expensive cigars and cheaper promises. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not from the man who stood before cheering crowds just months earlier, pumping his fist and bellowing about bringing American troops home. No more foreign wars. He'd roared to thunderous applause in Pennsylvania. America first means America only. The MAGA faithful had eaten it up, their red hats bobbing like a sea of blind devotion. But here, in the suffocating luxury of his Florida fortress, a different Donald Trump emerged one his working-class supporters never saw. The populist mask slipped away to reveal something far more sinister. A man willing to sacrifice everything he'd promised for a taste of Venezuela's liquid treasure. The contradiction was breathtaking in its audacity. The same mouth that had condemned endless wars now casually discussed regime change over Diet Cokes and gold-plated flatware. The same hands that had signed America First executive orders now traced invasion routes with the Mont Blanc penworth. More than most Americans make in a month. Energy executives nodded approvingly as classified intelligence reports detailed Maduro's weaknesses. Defense contractors practically drooled over projected military spending. Wall Street wolves circled like vultures, already calculating profit margins on Venezuelan reconstruction contracts. Meanwhile, in living rooms across America, families who had voted for peace watched their sons and daughters pack deployment bags. Once again, the parents who'd believed in bringing troops home now faced the horrifying reality that their children might die for Exxon's quarterly earnings. The man who'd promised to end foreign wars was allegedly plotting the biggest intervention in decades. But this story goes deeper than anyone imagined, and the true cost of this betrayal would shake America to its very core. This wasn't just another broken campaign promise. This was a complete betrayal of everything millions of Americans had voted for. In rally after rally across the heartland, Trump had looked directly into the cameras and sworn a sacred oath to war-weary families. "Your sons and daughters will never again die in foreign wars on my watch." Those words had resonated like gospel in communities devastated by decades of endless conflict. In Ohio, mothers who'd buried children in Afghanistan wept with relief. In Texas, fathers who'd lost limbs in Iraq finally felt hope that their younger sons might avoid the same fate. In Michigan, Gold Star families clutched those promises like lifelines, believing that finally, someone understood their pain. But behind the patriotic theater, a shadow presidency was already mapping out invasion strategies that would make Iraq look like a practice run. While Trump's base celebrated what they thought was the end of American imperialism, defense contractors were quietly updating their Venezuelan war plans, and energy companies were calculating extraction timelines. The hypocrisy was staggering, even by Washington standards. This was the same man who had spent years condemning stupid wars and promising to focus on America's crumbling infrastructure instead of foreign adventures. Yet here he was, allegedly orchestrating the largest military intervention in Latin America since the Cold War, while his supporters cheered his supposed isolationism at campaign rallies. For Venezuelan families, the stakes couldn't be higher. 24 million people were about to become pawns in America's latest oil grab, their chosen potential casualties in a war they never asked for. Mothers in Caracas faced the same sleepless nights that Iraqi and Afghan mothers had endured. If tomorrow would bring bombs instead of breakfast, if their neighborhoods would become battlefields for foreign corporate interests, the economic implications rippled far beyond Venezuela's borders. Oil markets were already responding to whispered rumors, with crude prices fluctuating wildly as traders positioned themselves for potential chaos. American families struggling to fill their gas tanks had no idea they might soon be paying even more, not because of scarcity, but because of Wall Street speculation on war profits. Meanwhile, corporate boardrooms buzzed with barely contained excitement. Energy executives who had been locked out of Venezuelan oil fields for years saw dollar signs in every leaked detail. Defense contractors updated their stock portfolios, knowing that prolonged conflicts meant prolonged profits. Reconstruction companies that had made fortunes rebuilding Iraq and Afghanistan were already drafting Venezuelan project proposals. The global stability that had taken decades to build hung by a thread. Latin American nations watched in horror as their worst fears materialized: the return of American gunboat diplomacy dressed up as humanitarian intervention. Russia and China saw opportunity in America's latest imperial overreach, ready to fill the void that U.S. aggression would inevitably create. But perhaps most tragically, this betrayal threatened to shatter the faith that ordinary Americans had placed in democratic institutions. If campaign promises meant nothing, if America First was just empty rhetoric designed to win votes, while corporate interests wrote the real foreign policy, then what hope did working families have for genuine representation? The voters who had trusted Trump's anti-war promises now faced a devastating realization. They'd been played by a master manipulator who'd weaponized their war exhaustion for his own political gain. What we discovered about the real players behind this plan will shock you. The pattern was as predictable as it was infuriating. Throughout his political career, Donald Trump had perfected the art of saying exactly what his base wanted to hear, while quietly doing the bidding of his corporate benefactors. Venezuela was just his latest masterpiece of deception. But the blueprint had been refined through years of calculated betrayals. In 2016, candidate Trump had thundered against regime change in Syria, calling it stupid and promising to bring troops home. His anti-war supporters cheered wildly, believing they'd found their peace candidate. But once in office, those same supporters watched in horror as he launched missile strikes against Syrian targets within his first 100 days. The explanation: his daughter had cried watching footage of chemical attacks. The reality? Defense contractors had donated millions to his inauguration fund. The Syrian flip-flop was just the beginning. Trump had campaigned against NATO expansion, calling the alliance obsolete and promising to reduce American military commitments abroad. His isolationist base celebrated, finally seeing someone who'd prioritize America's needs over European security. Yet within months of taking office, he was pushing for massive NATO budget increases and deploying additional troops to Eastern Europe. Lockheed Martin's stock soared. When it came to Venezuela, Trump's public persona and private ambitions diverged even more dramatically. On Twitter, he'd occasionally criticized Maduro's regime with typical bombast, but always stopped short of threatening military action. At rallies, he'd mock previous administrations for wasting money on foreign interventions while American cities crumbled. His supporters ate it up, believing their champion truly understood their priorities. But behind closed doors, at Mar-a-Lago, a very different conversation was taking place. Energy executives had become regular fixtures at Trump's private club, their seven-figure membership fees, buying them FaceTime with the would-be president. Harold Hamm from Continental Resources, Scott Sheffield from Pioneer Natural Resources, and executives from ExxonMobil treated the gaudy resort like their personal lobbying headquarters. The Venezuelan oil discussions had started quietly in 2019. During late-night dinners in Mar-a-Lago's opulent dining room, industry insiders would casually mention Venezuela's proven reserves, the largest in the world, while Trump listened intently. They painted vivid pictures of untapped wealth just 90 miles from Florida's coast, accessible with the right political changes in Caracas. Trump's fascination with Venezuelan oil wasn't new. As far back as 2017, he'd reportedly told aides that the South American nation had tremendous oil and questioned why America wasn't getting some of that. When advisors explained international law and sovereignty, he'd dismiss such concerns. With characteristic bluntness, "We take the oil. We keep the oil. Simple." The corporate courtship intensified throughout his post-presidency years. Energy lobbyists made pilgrimages to Palm Beach, bearing detailed presentations about Venezuelan extraction opportunities. They spoke Trump's language: billions in potential, revenue, massive job creation, American energy dominance. They conveniently omitted the parts about dead civilians, regional instability, and international law violations. Mar-a-Lago became an unofficial war room where oil executives and defense contractors mingled over champagne and caviar, sketching out invasion scenarios on cloth napkins. Trump would hold court, describing his Venezuelan fantasies with the enthusiasm of a child planning a treasure hunt. He'd boast about how easy it would be to take out Maduro, how grateful the Venezuelan people would be, how much money America would make. His ability to compartmentalize was breathtaking. At the same time, he was planning military intervention in private. He'd publicly tweet about endless wars in America First. His supporters never suspected that their anti-war champion was simultaneously plotting the largest oil grab in modern history. The cognitive dissonance would have been comical if the consequences weren't so deadly serious. The pattern was always the same: campaign as a populist, govern as a chronist, promise peace, deliver war, condemn foreign interventions, then plan bigger ones, tell working families he'd fight for them, then sell their children's lives to the highest bidder. His best's loyalty was just another commodity to be monetized. But this time was different. This time, the stakes were too high and the deception too blatant for even Trump's masterful spin machine to contain. Intelligence officials who'd watched him betray America's interests once before, were ready to act. Whistleblowers who'd remained silent during his first term had found their courage. International allies who'd been burned by his broken promises were preparing their own responses. He underestimated how far his opponents would go to expose the truth. Colonel Maria Santos had spent 23 years serving her country, but she'd never felt more patriotic than the moment she decided to betray her oath of secrecy. The daughter of Salvadoran immigrants, she'd joined the military to prove her American loyalties only to discover that true patriotism sometimes meant standing against your own government. As a senior intelligence analyst at U.S. Southern Command, Santos had watched Trump's Venezuela obsession grow from casual interest to dangerous fixation. She'd sat in briefing rooms where oil executives were treated like cabinet members, where invasion timelines were discussed over coffee and donuts. Each classified meeting felt like another nail in the coffin of everything she'd sworn to defend. Her parents had fled El Salvador's civil war, escaping the kind of American-backed violence that Trump now wanted to unleash on Venezuela. They had raised her to believe America was different, a nation that helped rather than harmed, that built rather than destroyed. But from her classified perch, she could see the ugly machinery of empire grinding toward another senseless war. Santos wasn't alone in her growing horror. Dr. James Shun, a State Department policy expert with 30 years of Latin American experience, had watched successive administrations stumble into foreign disasters. But Trump's Venezuelan scheme felt different, more reckless, more openly mercenary than anything he'd witnessed. The son of Chinese immigrants who had built a small restaurant business in California, Chun understood what real America First meant, investing in American communities, not foreign wars. Their unlikely alliance began during a classified briefing in March 2024, when Chun noticed Santos's barely concealed disgust as energy executives presented their liberation timeline for Venezuela, a subtle eye roll, a shared moment of recognition to career professionals, realizing they were witnessing something fundamentally un-American. Chun had already been gathering evidence of Trump's corporate capture, carefully documenting how energy lobbyists had essentially purchased foreign policy through Mar-a-Lago memberships. His meticulous files read like a corruption manual: who paid how much, when they visited, what policy changes followed. But he needed inside intelligence to prove the Venezuela connection. The third member of their informal resistance was Rebecca Martinez, an investigative journalist whose Pulitzer Prize-winning exposes of defense contractor fraud had made her a target of both corporate lawsuits and government surveillance. The granddaughter of Mexican farm workers, she'd built her career exposing how American foreign policy enriched elites while bleeding working families dry. Martinez had been tracking Trump's energy industry connections since 2016, mapping the flow of corporate money into his political machine. Her encrypted files contained smoking guns from Iraq to Syrio-documented proof of how campaign promises were sold to the highest bidder. But Venezuela represented something even more sinister: the complete abandonment of democratic principles for pure profit. Each had personal stakes that went far beyond career considerations. Santos thought of her teenage son, just 2 years from military age, and the possibility that his blood might be spilled for Exxon's quarterly profits. Chun remembered his father's stories of wartime China, the chaos that followed when great powers played games with smaller nations' lives. Martinez carried photos of Gold Star families. She'd interviewed mothers whose grief was measured in oil company stock prices. They'd all witnessed the devastating pattern of American foreign policy deception. Santos had seen the manipulated intelligence that justified the erratic invasion, the fabricated threats that prolonged Afghanistan. Chun had watched democratically elected governments across Latin America toppled for corporate convenience. Martinez had documented how defense contractors literally wrote their own contracts while American cities crumbled. But this felt different, more brazen, more nakedly transactional. Their covert collaboration began with careful digital dead drops and files passed through journalistic sources, classified documents accidentally left in public spaces. Santos provided the intelligence. Chun offered policy context. Martinez connected the corporate dots. They were careful, paranoid, knowing that exposure meant career destruction at minimum, possible prosecution at worst. The breakthrough came when Santos gained access to the actual Mar-a-Lago meeting transcripts, verbatim recordings of Trump discussing Venezuelan invasion plans with energy executives. The casual way he talked about regime change, like a real estate developer discussing a hostile takeover, made her physically sick. This wasn't foreign policy. It was organized crime with flags and anthems. Chun's analysis of the recordings revealed the full scope of the betrayal. Every campaign promise about ending foreign wars had been a lie. Every rally speech about America First had been theater. Trump's base, the working families who'd trusted him to bring their children home, were being sold out to the highest corporate bidders. Martinez knew she had the story of the decade, but also the target on her back to match. Her previous exposés had triggered FBI investigations, death threats, and lawsuits designed to bankrupt independent journalism. But some stories were too important for personal safety considerations. Years of watching broken promises had prepared them for this moment, the moment when career officials, policy experts, and investigative journalists would risk everything to save their country from its own government's corruption. The first salvo came at 4:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, delivered through the encrypted channels that had become Martinez's trademark. Her initial story dropped like a bomb across social media, complete with audio snippets and leaked documents that made denial impossible. By sunrise, cable news was in full meltdown mode. Trump's response was swift and predictably unhinged. FAKE. News hoax. He thumbed furiously into his phone from the Mar-a-Lago breakfast room. Disgusting lies from failed journalists and deep state traitors. I never said those things about Venezuela. Total fabrication. But the audio was damning, and everyone knew it. His voice, unmistakable and crude, discussing Venezuelan oil fields like a pirate dividing treasure. The more he denied it, the guilty he sounded. By noon, he had posted 17 contradictory tweets, each one revealing more than it concealed. The political establishment went into full panic mode. Senate Republicans who'd spent years defending Trump's foreign policy reversals suddenly found themselves trapped between loyalty and self-preservation. Marco Rubio, who had built his career on hawkish Latin American positions, issued a carefully worded statement about needing more information. Ted Cruz went silent entirely, his Twitter account mysteriously inactive for the first time in years, but it was the corporate media response that revealed the true battle lines. CNN and MSNBC ran wall-to-wall coverage, their panels breathlessly dissecting every leaked document. Fox News, meanwhile, devoted exactly 7 minutes to the story before pivoting to a car chase in California. The message was clear. Even Trump's most loyal media allies couldn't find a way to spin armed invasion as America first. The international reaction was swift and devastating. President Maduro appeared on state television flanked by military commanders, denouncing the imperialist plot while announcing defensive preparations. Brazil closed its Venezuelan border. Colombia's president called an emergency session of the Organization of American States. Mexico recalled its ambassador to Washington for consultations. The regional dominoes fell quickly. Ecuador expelled the U.S. military attached. Peru suspended joint counter-narcotics operations. Even traditionally pro-American governments in Chile and Uruguay issued statements condemning interference in sovereign affairs. Trump's Venezuelan fantasy was turning into a hemispheric nightmare before it even began. Energy markets went haywire. Oil prices spiked, then plummeted, then spiked again as traders tried to price in the possibility of a Latin American war. Stock dropped 8% in morning trading. Defense contractors' shares soared, then crashed when investors realized the political impossibility of the scheme. Wall Street's war profiteers were learning a hard lesson about betting on exposed conspiracies. Trump's allies found themselves in an impossible position. Those who doubled down looked complicit in warmongering. Those who distanced themselves appeared disloyal. Senator Lindsey Graham tried to thread the needle, claiming Trump was merely exploring all options for Venezuelan democracy. His explanation fooled no one and satisfied everyone, lest the whistleblower campaign intensified. Santos leaked additional classified assessments showing Venezuelan military capabilities documents that revealed how catastrophically unprepared America was for the invasion Trump wanted. Chun published detailed analyses of similar interventions, complete with casualty projections and cost estimates that made Iraq look economical. Martinez's follow-up stories documented the money trail in excruciating detail. Every Mar-a-Lago membership fee, every energy executive donation, every defense contractor contribution. She painted a picture of American foreign policy being auctioned to the highest bidder while voters believed they were choosing peace. Trump's social media meltdowns grew increasingly erratic. He attacked Santos as a failed military reject, Chun as a China sympathizer, and Martinez as a third-rate hack. His fury only validated their reporting, each angry tweet serving as confirmation of the story's accuracy. By week's end, 3 Republican senators had called for hearings. 2 House committee chairs demanded classified briefings. International allies were questioning decades of security cooperation. The man who had promised to restore America's credibility was achieving the opposite again. Then came the leak that changed everything. The recording began with the clink of expensive kazoo and the rustle of classified documents being spread across a mahogany table. What followed was 43 minutes of unfiltered audio. That would shatter the last illusions about Trump's America First agenda. Look, here's the deal with Venezuela. Trump's voice crackled through encrypted channels at 2:17 a.m. Eastern. Maduro's sitting on liquid gold, more oil than Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Kuwait combined. We're talking about maybe $3 trillion worth of crude just sitting there while American families pay through the nose at gas stations. The Mar-a-Lago war room came alive in Martinez's latest leak. Energy executives murmured agreement as Trump continued his pitch, his voice growing more animated with each word. We go in hard. We go in fast. Take out Maduro, install someone friendly, and boom American energy independence overnight. Plus, we get 20% of everything we extract. Call it a liberation fee. Harold Hamm's gravelly voice joined the conversation. Mr. President, Continental Resources has been preparing extraction teams for 2 years. We can have rigs operational within 6 months of regime change. The Venezuelan people will thank us for freeing them from socialism. But it was Trump's next words that landed like a nuclear bomb. Forget the Venezuelan people, this is about American shareholders. My base doesn't need to know the details. They voted for jobs and cheap gas. We'll give them exactly that, just not how they expected. The laughter that followed, rich, corporate laughter, over the betrayal of working families would haunt American politics for generations. Santos had risked everything to capture that audio, hiding a recording device during a classified briefing she'd been ordered to attend. The 43 minutes revealed the complete scope of the deception: invasion timelines, corporate profit-sharing agreements, plans to use American military bases as launching points for private energy extraction. Trump's response to the devastating leak was a masterclass in instead of denying the audio's authenticity, he doubled down with characteristic recklessness. So what if I want to make America rich again? Venezuelan oil could power our economy for 100 years. The deep state doesn't want you to know how much money we're leaving on the table. The MAGA base's reaction was swift and devastating. In Ohio diners where Trump flags had hung for years, working families stared at television screens in stunned silence. These were the same people who'd cheered his promises to end foreign wars, who'd believed their anti-war champion would finally bring their children home. Facebook groups that had worshipped Trump for months turned into battlegrounds overnight. He promised no more foreign wars, wrote Susan Matthews, a Gold Star mother from Michigan. My son died in Afghanistan so oil companies could get richer, and now Trump wants to do it again in Venezuela. I feel so betrayed. But the true believers doubled down with religious fervor. Trump knows what's best for America, insisted Jake Patterson, a coal miner from West Virginia. If taking Venezuelan oil makes gas cheaper, I'm all for it. America first means America gets what it wants. The schism within Trump's base became impossible to ignore. Veterans groups that had endorsed him began withdrawing support. Military families who'd trusted his anti-war rhetoric organized protests, rallies, but corporate-funded MAGA influencers pushed back, spinning invasion as economic patriotism. International reaction was swift and coordinated. President Maduro appeared on Venezuelan television, surrounded by maps of American military bases, announcing a maximum defensive posture against imperialist aggression. Russian military advisors arrived in Caracas within hours. Cuban missiles were reportedly being moved to defensive positions. Brazil's president convened an emergency session of UNASUR, the South American Union, demanding international sanctions against any nation contemplating Venezuelan invasion. Mexico's foreign minister called the leaked plans a return to gunboat diplomacy that violates every principle of international law. Oil markets went into complete chaos. Brent crude spiked to $135 per barrel as traders priced in the possibility of regional war, then plummeted to $78 when analysts realized the political impossibility of Trump's scheme. American gas prices jumped 30 cents overnight, hitting working families with the immediate cost of his warmongering fantasies. But while American consumers suffered, defense contractors and energy companies celebrated behind closed doors. Lockheed Martin's stock hit record highs. Halliburton executives were reportedly planning reconstruction scenarios for post-invasion Venezuela. ExxonMobil quietly increased its lobbying budget by 40%. The corporate media's response revealed the true power structure. While CNN and MSNBC expressed manufactured outrage, their energy company advertisers remained conspicuously quiet. Fox News pivoted to attacking the whistleblowers, questioning Santos's mental stability and Chun's loyalty to America. The military-industrial complex connections became impossible to hide. Defense contractors who'd donated millions to Trump's campaigns were revealed as the primary architects of the Venezuelan invasion plans. Eric Prince, the Blackwater founder, had reportedly submitted detailed proposals for private military solutions to the Maduro problem. Corporate board members moved seamlessly between energy companies and defense contractors, their financial incentives perfectly aligned with endless war. The revolving door between Pentagon procurement and private industry spun so fast it created its own weather system of corruption. Chun's leaked State Department analysis laid bare the true costs. 50,000 to 100,000 projected casualties in the first year alone. $2 to $3 trillion in total expenses over a decade. Complete destabilization of Latin America. The destruction of every alliance America had built over 70 years. But the smoking gun was Trump's own words. Captured in crystal clarity, "Look, I told them whatever they wanted to hear about ending wars. But business is business. Venezuelan oil is the deal of the century, and I'll be damned if we let some socialist dictator keep it from American companies." The mask was finally off. This was never about America first. It was about corporate profits wrapped in patriotic rhetoric, sold to working families who deserved so much better than another blood-soaked war for oil company stockholders. Martinez's investigation had exposed the ugly truth. American foreign policy was for sale to the highest bidder, and Trump was just the auctioneer. Within hours of Martinez's bombshell revelation, social media erupted into digital civil war. #NotAmericofers began trending worldwide, accompanied by devastating memes contrasting Trump's campaign promises with his leaked war plans. #OilFirst followed close behind, shared by military families posting photos of fallen soldiers with captions like, "My son died for ExxonMobil, not freedom." But it was #Venezuela Strong that captured global imagination. The hashtag united everyone from Caracas street vendors to European parliamentarians, Brazilian environmentalists to American Gold Star mothers. Venezuelan musicians created haunting, protest songs that went viral on TikTok. Artists worldwide painted murals depicting Uncle Sam as a corporate oil executive, hand-stripping black crude. International coalition building happened at lightning speed. Within 72 hours, 15 Latin American nations had signed a mutual defense pact pledging to resist any aggression against Venezuelan sovereignty. The European Union issued its strongest condemnation of American foreign policy since the Iraq invasion. Even traditionally neutral Switzerland froze Trump-linked energy company assets, pending investigation of war crimes planning. China and Russia seized the propaganda opportunity with devastating effectiveness. Beijing's foreign ministry spokesman held daily press conferences highlighting American hypocrisy, contrasting Trump's peace promises with his war preparations. Russian media flooded social platforms with side-by-side videos. Trump promising no foreign wars, followed immediately by his leaked audio planning Venezuelan invasion. Congressional Democrats, stunned by the brazenness of the exposed deception, launched 3 simultaneous investigations. House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff announced subpoenas for every energy executive who'd attended Mar-a-Lago meetings. Senate Foreign Relations demanded classified briefings on Venezuelan military assessments. The Government Accountability Office began a died-in defense contractor, connections to Trump's campaign, but it was military families who delivered the most devastating response. Veterans for Peace organized simultaneous protests at 17 Trump properties, their members in full uniform holding signs reading, "We won't die for big oil again." The American Legion, which had endorsed Trump in 2020, voted to withdraw support pending clarification of foreign policy positions. Major General Patricia Williams, retired from the 82nd Airborne, appeared on every major network. "I spent 30 years serving America, not ExxonMobil. Any president who sends our children to die for corporate profits has betrayed everything our flag represents." The corporate media's coverage revealed their own complicity in the military and industrial complex. CNN and MSNBC provided wall-to-wall coverage of congressional hearings and international reactions. But their energy company advertisers remained conspicuously absent from critical analysis. Fox News doubled down, attacking Martinez as unpaid and Santos as a deep state operative, while ignoring the leaked audio entirely. Alternative media exploded into the void. Independent podcasters gained millions of subscribers by providing unfiltered analysis of the corporate connections. YouTube journalists documented every energy executive's Mar-a-Lago visit with obsessive detail. Substack writers connected decades of foreign policy dots, showing how Venezuela was just the latest iteration of endless war profiteering. Protests erupted at gas stations nationwide, with activists holding signs reading "Every gallon funds imperialism" and "War for oil equals un-American." Exxon stations faced coordinated boycotts. Shell executives received death threats. Chevron's corporate headquarters required police protection. The most powerful protests happened at Walter Reed Medical Center, where wounded veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan joined families of active duty soldiers. Their message was simple, but devastating. We've bled enough for oil company profits. Trump properties became flashpoints for rage. Mar-a-Lago was surrounded by protesters chanting blood for oil. Shame, shame. The Trump Organization faced mass cancellations of events and memberships. Corporate sponsors fled his golf tournaments. Even traditionally supportive police unions began questioning their endorsements. Social media platforms struggled to contain the information warfare. Facebook faced accusations of suppressing anti-war content while promoting pro-intervention posts. Twitter's trending algorithms seemed rigged to minimize critical coverage. TikTok became the primary battlefield for information sharing, with Venezuelan creators teaching Americans about their country's history and culture. The economic implications rippled through every sector. Tourism to Latin America plummeted as travelers feared regional instability. Airlines canceled routes to South American destinations. Immigration lawyers reported a surge in Venezuelan asylum applications, families fleeing potential war zones. But perhaps most devastating was the spiritual crisis among Trump's base. Church groups that had supported him began organizing prayers for peace services. Evangelical leaders who'd backed his candidacy issued statements about the moral incompatibility of Christianity and war profiteering. This wasn't just about one policy, it exposed the entire system. Decades of corporate capture, military-industrial corruption, and democracy for sale to the highest bidder. The Venezuelan revelation had pulled back the curtain on American empire, revealing the ugly machinery of endless war that enriched elites while bleeding working families dry. The question was no longer whether Trump would invade Venezuela. The question was whether American democracy could survive the revelation of its own corruption. In the end, the Venezuelan crisis taught America a fundamental truth that transcended partisan politics. Authentic patriotism means holding leaders accountable, not offering them blind loyalty. The whistleblowers who risked their careers, the journalists who pursued truth over access, and the citizens who demanded honesty over comfortable lies, these were the real patriots, defending democracy from its own corruption. Colonel Santos never returned to active duty, but she found something more valuable than a military career: the knowledge that she'd chosen country over convenience when it mattered most. Her leaked documents became the foundation for congressional legislation, requiring public disclosure of all foreign policy discussions involving corporate representatives. No more secret war planning in luxury resorts. Dr. Chun's analysis of the Venezuelan scheme became required reading in foreign policy schools worldwide. His detailed breakdown of corporate capture mechanisms helped a new generation of diplomats recognize when legitimate security interests were being subordinated to private profit. Real America first. Foreign policy meant advancing American workers' interests, not energy executives' portfolios. Martinez won her second Pulitzer, but more importantly, her investigation sparked a renaissance in investigative journalism. Independent media outlets that had struggled for funding suddenly found themselves flooded with subscriber support from citizens hungry for unfiltered truth. Corporate media's credibility never recovered from their complicity in war profiteering narratives. The Venezuelan people, meanwhile, demonstrated what authentic national sovereignty looked like. Rather than succumbing to foreign-backed regime change, they united across political lines to defend their right to their resistance inspired movements worldwide, proving that small nations could still stand up to imperial powers when backed by international solidarity. The energy independence debate was permanently transformed. Instead of seeking oil through foreign wars, Americans began demanding investment in renewable infrastructure that couldn't be bombed, sanctioned, or held hostage by unstable regimes. Solar panels and wind farms became symbols of genuine energy security power, generated by American workers on American soil. Trump's political career effectively ended the moment ordinary Americans heard him laughing about their details while planning to risk their children's lives for corporate profits. The MAGA movement splintered permanently between authentic populists seeking working-class empowerment and corporate nationalists selling militarism as patriotism. The difference became impossible to ignore. Military families who'd trusted Trump's anti-war promises organized into a powerful political force, demanding transparency in foreign policy planning. Their message resonated across party lines. Politicians who promise peace while planning war deserve neither votes nor respect. No more Batanzwich campaigns that sell peace and deliver endless conflict. The broader lesson transcended any single politician or policy. American democracy had been captured by corporate interests that wrapped themselves in patriotic rhetoric while pursuing agendas that enriched elites at working families' expense. The Venezuelan revelation exposed this system so thoroughly that denial became impossible. Citizens learned to ask harder questions. Who profits when America goes to war? Which corporations benefit from foreign interventions? How do campaign contributions influence foreign policy decisions? Democracy depends on informed skepticism, not trusting faith in authority figures. International allies, meanwhile, gained new respect for American civil society even as they lost faith in American government. The whistleblowers and journalists who exposed the Venezuelan scheme proved that ordinary Americans still valued truth over empire, justice over corporate profit. The resistance to warmongering came from below, not above. The Venezuelan crisis ultimately strengthened both American democracy and international law. Corporate war planners learned that their schemes couldn't survive public scrutiny. Future administrations understood that energy executives couldn't simply purchase foreign policy through campaign contributions. Transparency became democracy's most effective weapon against corruption. Perhaps most importantly, the crisis reminded Americans that genuine patriotism requires constant vigilance against those who would exploit national symbols for private gain. Loving your country means protecting it from leaders who would sacrifice its values for corporate donors, profits. True America First policies serve American families, not multinational oil companies. The Venezuelan people kept their sovereignty. American soldiers kept their lives. Corporate war planners lost their credibility, and democracy proved that informed citizens remain the ultimate check on concentrated power. In the end, that's what real patriotism looks like: choosing truth over convenience, justice over profit, and people over powerful interests. 7. When the powerful wrap themselves in flags and claim to speak for the nation they're actually betraying.